I'm your host, Michelle Lawrence, and you're watching Black Tea, an interview series with Black women in advertising presented by Muse by Clio. I hope you enjoy this episode featuring Makeda Loney, copywriter at Martin Agency. Check it out. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to Black Tea, the very first interview of Black Tea. I am so excited to be here. Starting off with our very first guest, I'm going to let you do the honors. Please tell the people who you are, what you do, and where you're based.
Cool. Hi, my name is Makeda Loney. I'm a copywriter at the Martin Agency, and I'm based in Chicago.
Nice. So how did you find advertising?
So when I was in college, I joined the American Advertising Federation chapter on campus. I actually wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do. I'm a poet, and that's how I started writing. And a friend of mine was like, hey, I think you'd be really good for this thing I'm a part of on campus. And I was like, you know what? I should join another club. That seems fun. And so I joined, and I actually realized, I was like, wait, I can do this and I can make this a career. And she was like, yeah. And I was like, oh, sweet. So I ended up going to portfolio school. After college, I went to the Creative Circus, and then that's how I started my career in advertising.
That's awesome. It's always interesting to hear how many of us, especially people of color, especially women of color, find advertising in these untraditional ways. You know, we don't come from ad families often. So it's always, I like to tell that story. My story is also a little bit weird like that. Same thing. Had a passion for art. I was actually an art teacher before this because I thought
Cool.
that's the one job you could have in art as far as I
Yeah.
and so when I found advertising, it was like, wait, I don't have to be broken, busted, and bored, and I can also
Right.
make money, and I can also be creative. Okay, sign me up. Where do I sign?
Right.
So that's fascinating. Poetry, that's dope. How do you think that's influenced your POV in your work as a copywriter?
Oh goodness. It's weird because I think I'm just a naturally emotional writer. And I feel like, a lot of different brands have, of course, a lot of different tones of voices, and having that ability to, be able to switch back and forth to one brand that's more funny, one brand that's more serious, one brand that may be a little bit more poetic than the others. Especially when I started out, it was really hard for me to try to find that balance of how do I show what I'm strongest at, but also deliver on what the voice of the brand is and keep it true. So though I don't have a ton of poetic things, which I think is good, it helps me become more well-rounded of a writer. I still get excited when I find those pockets of moments where I can bring.
Let's talk a little bit about advertising while Black women. How do you think your unique POV as a Black woman has influenced the way you show up for your work, how you show up for creative in a predominantly white industry?
That's a loaded question. It's because as a Black woman, we all have such unique viewpoints. I mean, of course, everybody does, but the way that we take in the world, especially with the world that doesn't treat us necessarily the best, that doesn't treat us the way that we should be treated, it can sometimes be really hard to try to give, how do I say it? It's sometimes with brands, you're not necessarily talking to your people, and so it can be really hard sometimes to try to put on this really positive face, and so especially for certain brands where that some of them may have a history of not being the most wholesome. I don't know how to dance around that without exactly saying what I'm trying to say.
I mean, you don't need to.
Okay, cool. Yeah, some brands are just inherently racist from the things that they do and the way that they put things out, the way that they treat people in stores. For example, there was something that I was working on, and I had a really hard time trying to say, oh, we stand with Black people, especially when the George Floyd protest started happening, and every single brand had something to say because they wanted to, they treat it more as a trend than actually caring. And it's you're asking me as a Black woman who is heavily affected by everything that's going on right now, I can't even think properly.
Right.
And for this brand that literally locks up the Black women hair care products and leaves all of them, like all the rest of them, just for people to take. And like, you know, it's one of those things where it's like, you're asking me to say, oh yeah, no, totally, Black Lives Matter, we totally stand for that, that's awesome. But yet my lived experience with your company is something complete that says something completely different. So it's like, how do you put on a face of, like, a professional face of, yes, sure, you're asking me to write this, and I happen to be one of the only Black women available to write this. So it puts me in a weird corner, but also I don't think I can be authentic in the way that I'm feeling in this moment. And that's just like one glaring moment that I've had where it's just like, holy shit, like this is everything that we kind of have to deal with on a daily, but just so amplified. And so you like think about all the other like subtle hints and subtle moments. Like for example, when I talk about being a poet and bringing some of that to my work, I had another instant where a client was like, this sounds great, but you know, we want to lessen the way, I can't remember exactly how they said it, but it was one of those things where it's like a little less slam poetry, a little bit more just like baseline, like, you know, it's one of those things where it's just like, we know what the underline of what you're saying is.
Yeah, well, it's based on the premise that white culture is somehow default, and then all our culture is culture, you know. So to say like the baseline is whiteness, and then how far away from that can we
exactly
like, why is that the baseline, you know? That's, I mean, I feel like the market is certainly past that in terms of who's spending money and who we're advertising to. So, you know, when is the culture of our industry going to catch up, you know?
Exactly.
We'll get them there bit by bit. So on that note, then, what would you say to encourage a young Black woman aspiring to get into advertising or struggling with imposter syndrome, with all of those different types of messages coming at her? What would you say to even your pre-advertising self, or someone who's looking at this industry from our POV?
I think the biggest thing, because I still, of course, suffer with imposter syndrome, like all the time. Like, how am I here? How did I, like, you know, but like, I think the one message that I have to constantly tell myself is that, like, despite everything that may happen, like, they hired you for a reason. You know, you are able to do what you do and people recognize that. And so take that with whatever you can, you know, because like it's really hard to exist in this space, especially like it being like a white dominated space. But you are that voice that somebody saw and was like, yeah, we want to bring her onto the team. So I mean, which is shitty to say, though, like, your experience there might not be the greatest, like, you still have the talent and you don't have to bend for anybody else, you know, because your voice or your art is inherent to who you are. And that's a talent that nobody can take from you, regardless of what they try to say or do. And you also have the power, if you don't feel comfortable someplace, to just leave, because you have that talent that somebody saw and somebody else is easily going to see that again. So don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Don't be afraid to be your most authentic self. Because when I was starting, I thought I had to assimilate in order to get by. And that was not a good feeling.
Not sustainable either.
Exactly. It's not sustainable. And at one point I just I was like, you know what? No, like, we're just going to do what I like. And I'm going to write the way I want to. And of course, the way that like gets the point across and still fulfills the brief. And I'm just going to try to be my most authentic self. And I feel so much better. And it feels so much lighter. And another piece of advice that I would give is find your people. If there is like a Black employee network, like at your agency, make friends with those people. If not, find other people in the industry on social media or connect on LinkedIn. So that way you feel like you have a network of other Black people to fall back on and to like make camaraderie with, so that way moving to the industry doesn't feel as lonely.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing advice. 100% agree. I see in your background that you have so much dope art going on back there. I'm like trying to like be nosy to see what's going on. There's such a beautiful collection going on back there.
Thank you.
What are you really inspired by right now? Obviously visual art, but what else is kind of getting your creative juices flowing outside of work?
So actually something that I started on my birthday is Twitch streaming.
Ooh,
yeah. And so like a lot of my background is like fed off of that. Like I have like a lot of my like video game art pieces, and I have like my regular stuff, but like Twitch streaming is such a different way of like exploring my interests and meeting other people and like being introduced to new art styles and just like the whole like media background of it, of things that people do with their streams and like getting creative and how they engage people. Yeah. And it's been an incredible journey. And like, though Twitch itself is also not the best platform when it comes to representation, I can definitely see that the Black community on Twitch is thriving and having a ton of fun. And video gaming is one of those passions that I've always had, but never truly explored it. And so now to have something that I just used to do with fun, for fun with friends, be like an actual side hustle where like I can meet so many new people, especially during quarantine, where I live alone. It's a pandemic. I can't go outside and see my friends, you know, to stay safe, but I've made so many new friends online. And just exploring my creativity that way, and like the way I set up my streams, the way I play my games and interact with people. That's been what's been getting my juices flowing currently, on top of like just doing some side illustrations for people when I have time.
Multifaceted, y'all. Copywriter who illustrates. What's your illustration style? What do you like to do?
So right now I mainly just like to so I use Procreate on an iPad. And let me see if I can like I don't have my iPad like charged, but I can show you a couple pieces that I've done on my phone. I actually thought that I was going to be an art director when I joined that advertising club on campus. Yep. And they're like, no, you're actually going to be a copywriter. And I was like, okay, cool. So I went down that route. And I mean, writing is definitely my strong suit, but yeah, like I do some digital art. So I don't know if that's
Ooh, beautiful.
So, yeah, so we're
gonna put your IG up. What is it? Is that where you're posting things?
Yeah. So my art IG is Kita Palooza. Yeah.
Amazing. Talk a little bit about I want this platform to also be a place where you know, obviously we're speaking about some of the challenges that we encounter as Black women, but I also want to hear about us killing it, because we do through those challenges end up you know, just killing it, like kicking ass. And I want to ask a couple of questions where you can just kind of talk your shit on yourself. So for first of all, what is a career goal that you've set and achieved already?
I guess my first one would be like to win like an award for what I've been doing. And like, I mean, when I first started so Burrell was my first place of employment, and a couple of my things have won Addies, and I forget what the name, but there's like a one specifically for like television and broadcast with Comcast. Yeah. I did, and Comcast was one of my clients, and it's won a couple of those too, which feels really good to have your work be recognized, especially like within like my first job. So I felt really good about that.
Doing it as you should. That's amazing.
Yeah, I think one of the things I worked on won a gold Addie, and I was just like, oh my God, like I was like, hell yeah, this is amazing.
Yeah, I love it. That's our episode. Thanks so much for watching Black Tea. Head over to musebycleo.com/Black Tea for more episodes.